I wanted to take a minute and talk about how to properly use an air pump in your tank because there's lots of people that I've seen put reviews online about pumps failing prematurely and not lasting very long before things wear out or diaphragms break. So there's a couple things that don't seem to be very well documented online for people looking for help to that can help avoid that premature wear. So I just thought I'd put together a quick video. Um, this here is a Tetra Whisper 10 that I just have extra right now. So I'm just going to use this as a something for you guys to look at for reference. Um, Inside of a regular, common air pump, the way that they work is they have a little magnetic motor, and that actuates a diaphragm, which is like a rubber, just like a bellows, if you're familiar with a bellows from way back in the day. And it just flexes back and forth. And it has a one-way valve in there so that it sucks in from the intake, which is behind this little cotton filter, and shoots out through another one-way valve out the outlet. So that rubber diaphragm is getting flexed like ridiculously fast, thousands of times a minute. So eventually that rubber gets weak and breaks, and it's expected that that will eventually break. It's not meant to last forever. Anything that's moving that much and that fast eventually breaks. They say if you're got a properly sized air pump and you're using it correctly, those diaphragms should last about 1.5 to 2 years. If you've got a major brand of pump, then you can usually find replacement kits, repair kits online for not too much money compared to buying a new pump. I think the Tetra ones are usually, depending on the size of your pump, anywhere from $5 to $10. And they'll usually come with a new filter in here. You just open up these screws and this all comes apart pretty easily. And you can replace the filter and replace the diaphragms. There's instructions with the repair kits if you get them. Things that can lead to those breaking prematurely, though, is going to be either your pump not being the appropriate size for your tank, or too much back pressure being caused by either an inappropriate air stone that you've got in your tank, or a pressure limiting valve, which they make valves that reduce the amount of air pressure that's getting to your device, to your air stone or whatever you're using. But you're not really supposed, or it's not best to actually use them on the actual air supply. There's a different way to do it. So this is a simple, it's not going to focus. This is a simple setup here to bleed energy off. There it goes, that's focusing. So it's got a T right here with a short piece of airline tubing, and coming off the T is a short piece of airline tubing, and then one of those pressure limiting valves. It's called the needle valve, but this has a little knob on it that you can twist to adjust how much air pressure goes through the valve. So what you want to do is you actually hook the end that has the T into your air pump, right? And then there, and then you, on the end of the T is where you put the air hose that's going to your tank. And you would put a check valve here if you need a check valve, depending on how your pump is situated. FYI, you need a check valve if your pump is below your tank, so that if power goes out, water doesn't siphon down into the pump and destroy it, because if water gets in, it'll destroy it. So if you need a check valve, just put another short length of airline tubing, and then the check valve with the arrow pointed towards your tank, and then the tubing coming off of that. But what this little setup allows you to do, and you can get these fittings, they come with some pumps, or you can get them at the pet store for like $1 or $2. They're really cheap, and you just need a T and the valve, and then you can just cut a couple small lengths of tubing off of your regular tubing. What this lets you do is you can open this valve a little bit and bleed some of the air pressure off of the air supply. What that does is instead of resisting the work the pump is trying to do and making it work hard to get air through, you just redirect some of the energy so that less air gets to your air stone. That way you can control how much air your air stone gets without putting back pressure on the pump. That's going to, having too much back pressure will significantly wear out your diaphragms sooner because they're trying to squeeze really hard instead of being able to move and do their thing without too much trouble. So having a setup like this, if you have a gang valve, you can do the same thing with a spare port on your gang valve. Just bleed off a little bit of energy instead of reducing the amount of energy. So if you can have something on your setup, if you've got a gang valve that's always wide open, getting as much air as it'll take, and then you reduce pressure to the other things, that way instead of the pressure being resisted, it has someplace to go. So this is what I recommend very highly. The other thing that I mentioned is your pump being the right size. Bigger pumps have bigger motors and stronger diaphragms and are designed to work on bigger tanks, because when you're going into a deeper tank or running a larger air stone, you need more power. The pumps, they think of them, they're not really, some of them you can get with power regulators, so you can turn down their pressure, which is always a good option if you get one like that. This one doesn't have it, so that's why you need to bleed the energy off to safely reduce the power. If you have one that you can reduce, then that's great. Otherwise, without having a reducing control right on the pump, then your pump is basically just always running at full speed, at full power. So if your pump is too small for your tank, then it's going to have a lot of resistance that it's not designed for, because it's trying to pump deeper and probably pump a stronger air stone. That's going to create back pressure, just like you're trying to avoid with this. So that's why you need to have the right size pump. You also don't want your pump to be too oversized, because then it's too bad to have not enough resistance as well. And then your pump, it's kind of like revving the engine in your car while you're in neutral. The pump's just going like full force with no load on it, basically, and then that just wears it out prematurely as well. So you want to have the right size pump for how much stuff you're trying to run on it. So keep that in mind. They all have guidelines on them for what size tanks they're meant to run. So follow the guidelines and use some common sense based on how your setup is working. The other thing is having the wrong sized air stone. So if you have a really tiny air stone that you're trying to run off a really strong pump, then that pump is trying to pump lots of air through a really small stone, and it's not going to be easy, and it's going to create a lot of back pressure as well, having that. So if you've got a really big tank with a really big pump to match, and you've got this itty bitty air stone, then your system's not balanced right. So you need to bleed off that extra energy or get a bigger stone. Have a stone that makes sense for your tank setup. That's very important. The higher end pumps, like the commercial grade pumps and stuff, are a totally different design on the inside. They use pistons. They kind of look like little, if you see one, I don't have one to show you, but they're like little cube with usually made out of metal, and they'll have fins going across them. They kind of look like a baby car engine, and those are piston powered. Those are totally different, and I don't know much about those, so this advice may not apply to those. Some of it might, some of it won't, I don't know. So look elsewhere for advice on those kind of pumps. But this will help maximize the longevity of your diaphragms on these more common consumer grade pumps. So I hope it helps people out, and I hope you guys enjoy your tanks. Bye.